Good afternoon and welcome back to today's WISE event. A special word of welcome to Her Highness Sheikha Moza bint Nasser and to Her Excellency Sheikha Hind bint Hamad Al Thani. It just feels like, please. It's hard to believe that we've come to the end of the WISE Summit. It really does feel like I was here just a few moments ago launching the entire event. We hope that over the past 2 days you've met new people, shared inspiring ideas, and that these will lead to future opportunities and networking. And really, this is the power of WISE, that you come together and it leads to all sorts of different educational opportunities. Before we delve into this session, a word of thanks once again to our partners who have made all of this possible. Our sponsors, Banco Santander, the Supreme Committee for Delivery and Legacy, EY Parthenon, and ExxonMobil. Our summit and program partners and research organizations. And finally, our media partners. And of course, as the conversation continues this afternoon, don't forget the hashtags for our sessions to tweet your comments and opinions. Now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to invite this year's WISE Prize for Education laureate on stage. Yesterday we heard a little about his journey, but we'll have him come up and tell us a little bit more. He's the founder of the Ashesi University College, which really has become one of the top universities in Ghana in less than 10 years. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Patrick Awuah.
Your Highness, Your Excellency, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is such an honor to be on this stage this afternoon. As I was heading to WISE 2017, I stumbled across an interesting poll on the summit website. And the poll asked, what do you consider to be the most important skill for today's world? There were 4 skills listed: complex problem solving, social and emotional intelligence, critical thinking, and creativity. 41% of respondents indicated that social and emotional intelligence is the most important skill for the world today. The truth is, all of these matter. The ability to cooperate with others, the ability to respect the beliefs of others, the ability to navigate complex opinions and ideas are all necessary to move any society forward. My journey over the last 15 years has been about helping spread this ethos through my work at Ashesi University. When I was completing high school in the early 1980s, a bright-eyed 19-year-old, I wanted nothing more than to be an astronaut. I read a lot of science fiction novels. I marveled at the NASA Space Shuttle program. The idea of exploring space fascinated and intrigued me. And I decided to apply to college in the United States to study engineering. It turns out, when I was applying to college, my family was desperate to get me out of Ghana. A military coup had brought our country's economy to a standstill. There was a lot of uncertainty about the country's future. Businesses closed. Severe food shortages spread all over the country. Inflation officially reached 100%. And the typical shop in Ghana consisted of empty shelves. Thankfully, I was accepted into Swarthmore College with a full scholarship to study engineering. And so it is that I arrived in the United States with $50 in my pocket and a head full of dreams. The education that I experienced at Swarthmore was different from anything I'd experienced before. Growing up in Ghana, my education had been built around rote learning. Questioning teachers could lead to serious trouble. And our curriculum was designed to educate people who would be good at following instructions. Swarthmore was the complete opposite. Our classes focused on teaching us how to ask the right questions, not what to think. We studied broadly. We learned to break down complex problems and to see problems from different perspectives. We pondered our responsibility as citizens of the world. And my multidisciplinary education in engineering at Swarthmore prepared me very well for Microsoft, where I went to work after I graduated. 1 year after I started at Microsoft, I would return to Ghana for the first time since leaving, and I was disillusioned by what I found. We still had a military government. The water ran 2 hours a day where my family lived, from midnight to 2 a.m. The telephones did not work, and so businesses sent messages by couriers traveling on motorcycles through the capital. This was a stark contrast from my new life in Seattle and at Microsoft. So I returned to the United States and I said to myself, I will never return to Ghana. I would never move back home. 5 years later, my son was born and everything changed. Our son, our own. His birth changed the way I see the world. So as a father of an African child, I wondered, how would he see himself growing up? What would Africa mean to him? And this is really where my reset happened. I realized I didn't have the power to disown a continent. And so I started to think through what it would mean to move back. There are 2 questions in my mind. Why was Africa so restrained in its ability to move forward? And what was the most impactful thing that I could do to help speed up progress? I spent time speaking with friends and family back home in Ghana, trying to gain perspective, what the challenges were. And repeatedly, one word stood out: leadership. Across multiple challenges, it didn't matter whatever challenge we were talking about, leadership stood out as the root of what was holding us back. It was clear that the people who had the ability to influence or drive change were either simply maintaining the status quo or too focused on self-interest to act for the benefit of the larger society. And when I looked at the people in positions of influence, they all had one thing in common: a tertiary education. I also learned that less than 5% of college-age students in Ghana and in Africa attended college. That number has risen slightly since then. So almost by definition, sitting in any college classroom in Africa are the people most likely to be making decisions that will affect the trajectory of their generation and Africa's future. And so I decided, this is my answer. If there's one thing I could do, the most impactful thing would be higher education. So one morning I wake up and I ask my wife, what would you say if I said, I'm going to quit Microsoft today let's go to Ghana. Let's go educate leaders. And she immediately said, yes, let's do it. So I sit up in bed and I ask, wait, don't you think we should even just think about this a little bit? And I was so surprised. And it took me, I was the one who held us back. It took me a year after I had her full permission to leave. I eventually quit my job and we started to work to establish Ashesi. For someone who had once aspired to be an astronaut, those early experiences brought me quickly back down to earth. It was difficult. We hadn't anticipated the difficulty of navigating the accreditation process in Ghana. We hadn't anticipated the difficulty of fundraising. But Ashesi's founding team was resilient. Instead of postponing our launch to focus on raising money for a campus, we put our personal savings behind the university and we launched in a rented home in Ghana's capital city of Accra, with bedrooms and living rooms converted to classrooms. In 2002, we opened our doors to 30 students. Our first instructors came in as visiting faculty and volunteers from Microsoft and from universities in the United States and the United Kingdom. Some of our pioneer students quit in those first few weeks and left for other institutions, unsure whether Ashesi was the right fit for them, or frankly, whether Ashesi would last. But most of that class stayed, determined to work with us to build this university. They considered the university their own, and they spent time building the student culture and working with us to improve the curriculum. It was inspiring to watch them tackle difficult problems inside and outside the classrooms. From that first class of 30, today, Ashesi has nearly 900 students and on track to have 1,000. On track to have 1,000 students enrolled by the end of next year. Half of our students are women. Half of our students receive scholarships from the university. The 25 countries represented on our campus. We founded Ashesi University with an intentional mission to educate ethical entrepreneurial leaders. The spirit of curiosity, the willingness to do the right thing even when no one is watching over them, the concern for the well-being of others, and the courage to take on difficult but important tasks. It is these skills and values that we believed would make the next generation great leaders. It is these skills and values that we have continued to nurture within our students. Our over 1,000 alumni are working in high-impact careers on the continent and around the world. 90% of them are staying on the continent. Nearly all our graduates receive job offers, start a business, or enroll in a graduate school within 6 months of graduating. And the feedback from the people they work with is phenomenal. Employers are impressed with their ability to tackle complex problems, their ability to deal with ambiguity, and their integrity. Each year, as Ashesi students graduate from Ashesi, we watch them head out into the world full of hope that they will overcome the hurdles in their way. And many of the stories I hear every day about what they're accomplishing inspire me. I am not an astronaut, but there are days when I feel like I'm among the stars. Here are some examples. Alumna Regina Konu, who was named on BBC's list of 100 most inspirational and innovative women in 2017 for her work bringing computer science education to more women in Africa. Claude, Henry, Derry Dean, and Charles, who started a tech business, Dream Oval, in Ashesi's computer labs. Today, they serve over 5 million customers through their tools. They're valued at over $10 million and are providing jobs for over 100 people. Or Petemeni, who built and launched technology tools to help fight against the spread of Ebola in West Africa, and who is now helping rebuild his home country of Liberia. These stories and achievements remind me that the work that we do as educators is about making the world a more hopeful place for generations that come after us. We're in the hope business. Our job is to help the next generation look beyond present challenges to a brighter future that they're equipped to create. Ashesi is just at the beginning of its journey, this mission to help transform a continent. As we move forward, we will be engaged more fully in the question of how to achieve systematic change by working with other universities on the continent. We will also redouble our efforts, working with our students and graduates who will carry our mission and implement it through their work. The theme for this year's WISE Summit, Coexist, Co-Create, Learning to Live and Work Together, is more important than ever. As we confront a new set of storms in the world, we must remain steadfast in our task of bringing hope to the next generations. The WISE Prize symbolizes the hope I speak of. It is recognition of our work as educators, and I consider it such an honor to join the remarkable group of WISE Prize laureates. I'm so grateful to Your Excellency for leading the establishment of this prize. I also thank the jury and committee members who have given such recognition to the work we do at Ashesi University. And I'm grateful to all of you here today for the collective force for good that you represent in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to ask you to stay so that the audience can ask you some questions about your remarkable story. So if you join me on the soft sofa. It truly is an extraordinary story, very, very inspiring. I'd like to open it up now to the floor so that you get the opportunity to ask Patrick more about his story and anything else that you want to ask.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the great speech. It's showing great success. From where the story starts, how did you decide to leave the fantastic life and start from the scratch? What motivates you?
Okay, and I'll take number 3 and we'll come back to you.
Hi, I'm Faris and I'm a high school student, senior high school student. And my question is, as students who are almost going to the next step, which is in university, how can we bridge the gap between the knowledge economy and the knowledge society with all these fantastic technology tools that we have that can empower such as like a student like us to contribute meaningfully and even create knowledgeable societies, because as we know, us, the youth, we are drowning a bit in these tools. So I hope you understand my question. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so the first question was why I left Microsoft. You know, the day came when I realized that if I didn't take a stand and if I didn't return to try, that I might look back and regret not having tried. And, you know, when I was at the company, you know, we were very focused on changing the world through software. And my son is born, and I start to worry about Africa, and there was some really awful news coming out of Africa with Somalia and Rwanda, Liberia, Sierra Leone. And it seemed that those stories needed to change. It got to a point where I sort of moved from thinking about, I'm changing the world through the design and construction of software to, wait, this is just software. Changing the world has got to be about thinking about Africa. And so I decided I really needed to go try to do that. The question about how do students move from, I think it was about from
knowledge society
from a knowledge society
economy.
to a knowledge economy. We are in a world, I think that knowledge economy is a bit of a misnomer. We're in a world now where we're in a learning economy. So knowledge is changing, technology is changing, and it's all moving very quickly. And so the most important thing for a young person is to learn how to learn and to be motivated to continue to learn for the rest of your life. I think that the university of the future, the schools of the future, will not be entities that educate people for 4 years and then they're done. And then they come back for 2 years to get a master's and then they're done. They're going to be educating people throughout their careers. And so that 4-year period is a transition period of learning how to learn and getting you started in a career. But then as you move on in your career, you're going to be constantly be learning every week, every month, every year. You're going to be sort of engaged with some organization that is about education, and you're going to be engaged with your colleagues and learning throughout your life.
Great. I'll take a few more. So we've got number 6 and number 5.
Hello, I'm Olga, I'm from Russia, and I would like to ask you a very simple and very difficult question. What do you think? Do all children have a desire to learn? Or there are a lot of children who hate learning at all, who are lazy persons? Thank you.
Okay, and then I believe there was one here.
Thank you very much. My name is B.M. Flomopiwe, and I come from Liberia, and I am a Wise Learner Voice Fellow. My question is, what is that one thing that you can say to us as young people who are very passionate about changing the status quo of education in our country, given the radical posture of our government in terms of transforming education for every young person?
Thank you.
What was the question? What's the one thing to do?
What's the one thing to do to change the status quo of education in our countries?
Okay.
So the first one was about lazy children.
Actually, you said it's a simple but difficult question. I don't think it's so difficult. I haven't really met a child who doesn't want to learn. But I have met children who have been switched off learning. And I want to just share my own personal story. The first school I remember going to in Accra, I was there for just one term. And I hated that school. And I was the bottom of my class because the teacher hit us all the time if you made a mistake. And when my parents moved my cousin and I out of that school to another school, which is a very different environment, I was suddenly at the top of the class. And I always remained, one of the top 3 students in my class the whole time I was in school. But you wouldn't have guessed that from my first term at that one school when I was bottom of the class, just because the environment was just so awful, right? And I think as educators and as people who are working in education or policymakers, we need to approach children with this understanding that they're all curious, they all want to learn, and we need to create that environment for them to do so.
And the second question was changing the status quo of education in the countries.
Do what I did. Start something new. And don't do it by yourself. Find a small group of people to join you and start taking the steps. But you have to prepare yourself. You have to think of it. If you're going to climb Mount Everest, what would you do? You would find a buddy, you would train for it, you would read about it, you would gather the resources, and when you were ready, you would go to the mountain and find a Sherpa to guide you up. And you have to take the same approach in whatever endeavor that you want to take on, is find that group of people that are going to work with you to make it happen.
We can take another round of questions. So I'll take number 2, please, and 4.
Yes, hello. My name is Masa Mufti. I'm Syrian. Patrick, this is extremely inspiring for people coming from Syria. If I were to ask you one question or one advice for Syrian people who want to go back to Syria one day and to rebuild their country, universities, schools, name it, how can we face all the challenges that we know that we will be facing? What made you survive and make it through? Just give me the best tips. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
And we had a question just down here.
Dr. Patrick, congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm proud of you because I come from the same continent like you. I have a similar story like yours, but it's been very difficult for me to kickstart. I was a high school teacher until when I enrolled for a PhD in 2010. The reason why I enrolled for a PhD was because I wanted to own an institution of higher learning of my own. I had my PhD in 2013, and this is 2017. I've still not started. So when I listen to your story, it's very inspiring. I'm participating in this conference. There are many things that came into my mind. We're looking at the future. Technology is apparently going to be a big disruption of what is happening at the moment. If you were to advise me, given that I have not yet started, and technology seems to be a threat to brick and mortar classrooms, what would you be advising me? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So the first question was about returning to Syria and rebuilding schools, the best advice.
Well, the best advice that I know, I would say that my ability to return to Ghana was dependent on a number of things, but the most important is relationships. So I have nurtured very strong relationships when I was working at Microsoft, when I was in college, when I went to business school. Everywhere I go, I have been able to connect with people in a deep way. People who have trusted me and who've wanted to help me. And I'm incredibly grateful for that. And I think that when you proceed in life with this sort of openness to other people and really connecting with other people, it's a very powerful thing. The second is maintaining relationships. It's relationships again in Syria. And the third, I would say, you have to brace yourself. The people who struggle when they've returned to Ghana and I know a few people who've come to Ghana and they leave within 2 years. The people who struggle the most are the people who don't come in with the understanding to build a nation is a struggle. You should expect that it'll be difficult. And you should expect that if you work through that difficulty, you will eventually be successful. But if you go in thinking everyone is going to embrace you warmly and life is going to be easy and so on, then you're not going to make it. In my case, I also have the ability, so for example, I could shield myself in Ghana from things like power fluctuations and this sort of thing. What I've chosen to do is I shield my students. So on our campus, if there's a power outage, we'll automatically switch to generators and there'll be power. And we've installed solar. At home, I could do the same. I have the ability to do that. But my wife and I decided we would just install a very small solar panel, so when the power went out, we just had a few lights on at home. So we could feel what everybody else is feeling. And this sort of keeps me grounded. And so that's my advice. You've just got to have some grit. Now, there's a question about bricks and mortar versus technology. Online technology and online learning, I don't think is going to replace brick and mortar. I think it's going to complement bricks and mortar. If you want to educate doctors, they're going to be in a facility where they're dealing with other human beings. If you're going to educate engineers, they're going to build things. They'll be in a lab. They'll be dealing with materials. If you look at some of the biggest universities in the world, including Stanford and Harvard and MIT, which have major online, massively online courses going on, they're also making massive bets in bricks and mortar. Harvard has just announced that they're building a $400 million engineering facility. So my advice is don't think about it as an either or. It's going to be both. If you're engaged in the project that I'm engaged in, educating ethical leaders and teaching people to be able to connect across cultures and so on, you need to bring them together. People have to deal with people, and I don't think we can have everyone all just looking in their screens all the time. They'll do some of that, but it's not going to be a replacement. That's my personal opinion.
We'll take a final round of questions. Number 8, just there, and 1.
Where are you taking Ashesi next?
Okay, and number 1.
Thank you. I am Mohammed Al-Mohannadi. I'm the CEO of a company called Social Media Solutions. So I'm in the digital communication business. As well, I'm considered as a social entrepreneur in Qatar, creating social enterprises and thinking about gaps and needs in the communities. And I was one of the learners' voice in 2010. So I'm proud now, after 7 years, that I'm standing here speaking and expressing something. I have one question. Me, myself, didn't continue education. I dropped out from university, and I decided to live my life purpose, trying to fill up gaps in social communities. And then I found out that the urge of having proper education is always of a need. But the opportunity after you live your years and then people asking you to go back into education, it became a much difficult task with all the commitments that you're going through. Especially that I want to continue in Northwestern University because this is the field that I want to pursue in. How do you look into this? What is the right recommendations and suggestions for a person who have been being out of the education system, have lived through a life process, and then he thought of that he's in a block. How can he get back? How can he get back into track? And put educational element as one of the educational, or one of the elements in his life, let's say, future, and with all the commitments that it's already been existing.
Sure, thank you. I'll, if you can respond to that question first, and then we'll go to the...
All right, okay. So, I talked about earlier in response to one of the questions that I think that education is going to be something that people do for the rest of their lives. And I think for working professionals, the ability to take short courses at universities, the ability to take online courses, which allow you to study while you're working and dealing with all the other, responsibilities that you have, is a fantastic way to continue to educate yourself. I myself, and also just reading, right? I read a lot. I've recently signed up with someone to be a sort of an executive coach. That's sort of going back to school. It's different. We're doing it through Skype and so on. So that's what my advice will be for somebody who is already a professional, who's already running a business, and a grade in a course or a certificate is not necessarily all that important. It's more your performance that matters. And so taking those courses online or in a classroom that enables you to do your work better would be the way to go.
And where do you plan on taking Ashesi next?
So next for Ashesi is two things. One is that we need to continue to grow our organization and to really double down on driving innovation to be coming out of our university. And so there's work that we're doing. Our first 10 years was really focusing on ethics, and then we're going to continue that. Now, moving forward, we really want to see more companies starting out of our alumni body, and because jobs are so important, we want to see more new technology coming out of our institution. And so we're making some important investments in this area. The second thing, which I think is incredibly important, is that we have to start to think about systematic change. And how do you achieve scale? You achieve scale by the work of governments and the market, right? So we have to engage with the government, with public universities, with other private universities, not only in Ghana, but across the continent, and find a way for us to collaborate with each other in a way that strengthens all universities. And that kind of systems change, or movement, if you will, is incredibly important in Africa today. When I think about, we asked ourselves a question recently: what is Africa going to look like 50 years from now? The first answer is, well, do we even know what it's going to look like 10 years from now? What is the world going to look like 10 years from now? Well, we know, for example, that by 2050, which is less than 50 years from now, the population of Africa is going to double from what it is today. This is a tremendous challenge, but also an incredible opportunity. We know that we're going to have to create a lot of jobs. We know that we're going to have to build a lot of infrastructure. We're going to have to build a lot of schools. We're going to have to, most of what needs to be created in Africa has not yet been created. We know that science and technologies, whatever the world is going to look like, science and technology is going to play an important role. And we also know that the world is getting smaller, we're getting more closely connected. And so the ability for people to navigate cultures and to work with people across cultures is going to be important. So somehow, the systems work that we do, the systematic change that we're doing, needs to get all universities to focus on this idea that we need to be training people, educating people who can create jobs. We need to double down on technology and then engineering. We need to soften the borders between our countries, or maybe even remove the borders, because that ability to trade is going to be so important in the future. And this is what we're going to be focusing on.
Well, on that note, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Patrick, and congratulations again, ladies and gentlemen. Please congratulate.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Well done.